Thank you very much for coming through for the Winter School 2026. My name is Tracy Kajgamurandu, and I'll be your host today. So to start our day, please allow me to acknowledge our keynote speaker, who's yet to make it, the Honorable Minister Mthuli, our PAAB Secretary, Mr. Donald Mangenje, the Auditor General, Mrs. Vimbai Chikwenere, the ICAZ President, Mr. Emmanuel Modefi, ICAZ Senior Vice President, Ms. Angeline Muzira, ICAZ Junior Vice President, Ms. Kudakwashe Muswaka, ICAZ CEO, Mr. William Mandusoza, ICAZ past presidents here present, Mr. Bothwel Nyajeka, Mr. Martin Makaya, and Mr. Bryce Musendo, ICAZ Council members, ICAZ Secretariat, our dear sponsors, invited guests, and to you, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Our theme for this year, Chartering New Frontiers, Resilience, Innovation, and Sustainable Value, mainly emphasizes how we can orchestrate adaptive strategies that treat systematic risks. So I hope today we can engage our minds and participate in the high-impact sessions we have lined up for today. So before we start, allow me to direct you to the screen so that we can see a presentation from our platinum sponsors, Afreximbank.
The African Export-Import Bank, a proudly Pan-African institution with a vision to transform Africa's trade. Our mission, to stimulate a consistent expansion, diversification and development of African trade while operating as a first-class, profit-oriented, socially responsible financial institution and a center of excellence in African trade matters. We are now the Afreximbank Group, comprising Afreximbank, our subsidiaries, FEDA, the Fund for Export Development in Africa, and Afrexinsure, offering specialized insurance for trade and investment in Africa, and our managed trust funds. We are headquartered in Cairo, with 6 regional offices and 1 in the Caribbean. Today, we represent global Africa, with 53 participating African states and 13 participating Caribbean states. Our strategy, to realize impact through purposeful interventions based around 4 pillars. Through Pillar 1, intra-African trade and AFCFTA implementation, we promote intra-African trade via initiatives, including the Intra-African Trade Fair, to drive exposure for Africa's brands, goods and services. The AFCFTA Adjustment Fund, to help African states adjust to the AFCFTA trading environment. The Afreximbank African Collaborative Transit Guarantee Scheme, to streamline movement of goods across African borders. And the Creative African Nexus, to support Africa's cultural industries. For Pillar 2, industrialization and export development, we have introduced multiple initiatives, including the African Medical Center of Excellence, to improve Africa's healthcare landscape, our African Quality Assurance Centers, to test and certificate Africa's products, industrial parks and export processing zones, to advance industrialization and tackle commodity dependence, and our Project Preparation Unit, to support supply of investment-ready projects on the continent. For Pillar 3, leadership in global trade banking in Africa, initiatives include our Trade Finance Program to promote African trade and Direct Financing Program, providing financing and trade-related facilities to corporates. We also continually drive innovation and digitalization through our Africa Trade Gateway, a digital ecosystem that incorporates PAPS, Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, to expedite cross-border payments in Africa. MANSA, a single source of primary data for due diligence checks on African entities. TRADAR, a centralized digital hub of market intelligence and regulations for African markets. And Afreximbank TradeLink, enabling buyers to borrow against supplier invoices. And for Pillar 4, financial sustainability, Afreximbank performs strongly. The bank more than doubled its total assets and contingencies in half a decade, from 15.97 billion US dollars in 2019 to 40.1 billion US dollars in 2024. The Afreximbank Group has an experienced executive management team led by its president, Dr. George Ilombi, and high-caliber staff at every level, honored to serve our continent with tireless dedication. Afreximbank, transforming Africa's trade.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for one of our platinum sponsors, Afreximbank. Thank you. So as we start our day today, our first speaker will be taking us through workplace politics and the boards. I'm sure we all have our experiences in those areas, so we would like to hear what he has to say. If I can have the presentation of the speaker on screen, please.
Bothwel is a business leader and executive coach with over 30 years' experience in the private sector. He trained as a chartered accountant with KPMG in 1990 and has served as CFO and CEO across manufacturing, agribusiness, banking, insurance, hospitality, telecoms, and property in Southern Africa, with deep networks in Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, and Uganda. He is currently chairman of Zimnat Life Assurance and ACR Solutions, and a non-executive director of Turnall Holdings and Sable Chemical Industries, having previously served on numerous listed and regional boards. Bothwel is past president of ICAZ, where he now leads a project to professionalize public sector accountants in Zimbabwe, and is also active with Lions Clubs International as district governor for District 412A.
Thank you. A round of applause for Mr. Bothwel Nyajeka as he comes up.
Good morning. Jeez, you all look very sad, eh? Yeah, okay. I'm going to touch on a topic that no one teaches you. A topic that you learn through experience. And from my experience in the corporate world, it's something that if you learn and become aware of, it becomes very liberating. One of the things that I do now is I do coaching. And I do have a number of executives who I work with. And I always tell them that if you understand how to navigate what I'm going to be talking today, it's almost like you're driving a car with a handbrake on. The moment you figure out you have to take off the handbrake and disengage it, it changes. Because there's a speed that you thought it can go at, and it's rattling, but you disengage the handbrake, and this thing goes smoothly. Fellow accountants, it's corporate politics. You cannot run away from it. It's part of life. You know, as human beings, resources are scarce. And all of us are trying to influence to make sure that you get more of those resources. And there are two ways that you can do it. Either you fight for those resources, physical fights, or you negotiate your ways. And as human beings, through civilization, we've learned, yes, to fight, but in the corporate world, we can't fight. So there's an issue they call influence. So, ladies and gentlemen, corporate politics is about influence. How do you influence that you get your way? So, when you look at management theory and leadership theory, what is management. Management is getting things done through other people. And leadership is influencing people to follow you. And how do you do that? You have to influence those people. And that is at the center of politics. From my experience, when I started off as an accountant, I also got to be a company secretary. One of the things that I realized was that my job at half year and at year end was to start the process of writing the statement to shareholders, or the chairman's statement. I would write it, and I'll guarantee you the final product was very different from what I started, but the numbers were the same. The numbers were the same, but the final product of how things have been explained was totally different from the way I was going to explain it. That's when I realized that it's not just about the numbers, it's about how you interpret those numbers and how you communicate to influence. That's why politics reaches the numbers before the numbers reach the board. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. Now, a lot of people think that politics is just at the shop floor. Yes, that's where it starts from, but there's big politics at the board level. Let's look at the nature of workplace politics. Politics, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, is the pursuit of interest through influence rather than formal authority. What I found is, as a young accountant in the corporate world, I used to wonder why my colleagues in marketing, why my colleagues in human resources, I mean, they were getting all the nice jobs, and at times they get the fancy cars, and at times they're the ones who are very close to the CEO, and I'm left in my own corner. But when it comes to board meetings, my CEO would come into my office now. But during the course of the month, I'm not flavor of the week or the day. That's when you realize that these guys know how to influence. And these are simple things. Do you recognize someone's birthday? Do you attend their funerals? Do you go to their weddings? That's how you influence. I followed an event postman, and this lady is amazing. She has actually done a doctorate in workplace politics. She has researched and found out that politics is a skill that has to be learned. We can't avoid it. And she says, if you don't play politics, politics will play you. I don't know whether this thing is playing politics with me because it's not moving. Who can help me? So a lot of people, when we look at politics, we think it's bad, and we say it's a bad word. But it's actually quite good. You can't avoid it. It's either you play it well or you play it badly. Because you know what? For those who play politics well, they get promoted, they get things done more efficiently, and we wonder how they've done it. So at the end of the day, you have to figure out that performance alone is not enough here. You have to add now these things. There's relationships, networks, visibility, and influence. And those four things at the bottom, that's what moves you. You can perform, work 9 to 9, 12 hours. But if you don't have relationships, you don't have the networks, you're not visible, and you cannot influence, the reality is you've got the handbrake on. The moment you learn how to do it, you'll actually see life changes. I think the most recognizable faces of politics, number one, I think we all know about self-promotion and the sabotage. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, this happens. If you believe sabotage is something that happens in wars and everything, it happens in corporates. You tell your subordinates to do some work and they decide just not to do it. Oh, boss, I forgot. You believe he forgot? Maneuvering. We all know about maneuvering here. Factionalism. Territory control. This is all politics. You come into my office, you want to take my job. I know you from very far. From the day you come in as a learner graduate, I know what's happening. I know what's happening. So I see you. And you want to spend time with me to teach you so that in 2 years' time you take over my job. No ways. So you must realize that that's what Bothwel is doing. And you know, we have to figure out, how do I work with Bothwel so that I get what I want? You can't go back home and cry and say, Bothwel Nyajeka is difficult. No. That's, you're employed to move. So you have to figure out, how do you do it? But like anything else, there's constructive politics and there's destructive politics. At times, we tend to spend time on the destructive side, and we don't look at the constructive side. The constructive side are things where you are creating visibility. You know, in life, they say no one is going to play your drama. No one. At times, you have to beat it yourself. If you wait for Bothwel to beat the drum for you, why should I? What are my interests? So it's up to you to be visible. And I get a lot of accountants said, Bothwel, my work shows. Who says that? I mean, who says everybody is not working? Everybody is working. The marketing manager is working. You are working. So when you get to the boardroom, you want to say, they should look at how my board pack is, like I'm shining. Therefore, I'm better than the human resources guy. Forget it, guys. It's more than that. Of course, there's this destructive element of politics, which is the favoritism, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, the sabotage, the blame shifting, the self-interest above organization. That's the bad side. And that bad side, if you look at research, it's very negative. It leads to job dissatisfaction. It leads to employees leaving. So the bad side of politics, the destructive side, you want to try and avoid it. But you know what happens in life is certain people, when they don't play the good side, they end up going on to the bad. You know, it's like playing soccer. Eh? You might try to play it nicely, and then when you're growing up, rough. You see, that's the bad side. And you don't want that. And I don't encourage that bad side because it does not serve anyone. It's too selfish. A study that was done in Sri Lanka actually found that the bad politics actually results in underperformance. So you don't want that. So you need to emphasize on the good. So that's politics, right? At the shop floor, employee level, management, executive. Now I want to focus on politics at board level. So at board, the politics is very interesting. This is where Iran, United States, China, and everybody's playing. And you need to be very aware of it. At board level, there's power play. Who is the boss? Who has got authority to influence things in a way? Because you know what? If I'm perceived to have more power, then all resources will come to me. So we are dealing with perceptions. One of the things that I do in my spare time nowadays, I do write for the Financial Gazette. So I've got a column in the Financial Gazette. And I'm always telling people that you must be very sensitive and aware that at the end of the day, we're human beings. And we're driven by our own egos, by self-interest. That's what makes me wake up at night or early in the morning. It's your ego. That's what is motivating you. So when I come in here, I'm Bothwel. You can't touch me. So if you come and approach me the wrong way, guess what? I'm going to react. And my reaction can either be positive or negative. So you must be aware of that. Decision making. You know, decision making is about looking at options. All right? It's not scientific. You're dealing with people's minds. So how do you influence a decision to move into an option that you want? And thirdly, it's about management behavior. Because ultimately, when you look at boards get delegated authority from the shareholders, and boards at the same time are now responsible for the operations. But the boards cannot manage. They have to appoint a CEO, right? So the CEO is now managing the company. And the CEO has to relate to the board. And there's politics there. Because my thinking as MD might be different from the thinking of the board. How do I move the board to think like me or to move my agenda? So it's very important when you are sitting in the boardroom. You must be aware, right, that there are conflicting interests. And your job is to say, how do you move those conflicting interests so that you achieve what you want? You know, when you sit in the board, there are 4 areas when you're in the board. I mean, there is friends, enemies. Enemies are these guys who, whatever you say, they are not going to agree with you. You might try, they are not going to. Friends, whether you are wrong or right, they will agree with you because you're friends. And then you've got allies, right? These are guys where you have agreed on an interest. You are going to be together. And then you've got adversaries. These are guys who are saying, you know what? I don't understand what you want to do. So, because until I understand, I will not be with you. My advice that I give my participants in coaching lessons is that, you know what? You don't need to have friends. Because friends are dangerous, because they're not going to tell you your blind side. Right? And normally in corporate politics, is the blind side that results in you not being effective. We call it, when we're young, is being covered from the left. You are not seeing, you're expecting it's coming from there, and then comes from the left. So you don't want friends. Enemies, you don't want enemies, because it becomes dysfunctional. All right? You want allies, right? Guys who understand what you are there for, and you have convinced them, and then they will support you because you've got a common interest. Adversaries are good guys. All it means is that if Bothwel is not on your side, you now need to spend time with Bothwel so that he understands and you move him. So you do work, and you can move adversaries to be allies, right? The dangerous guys, normally I say, are the neutrals, because you don't know whether they are with you. So you might have to spend time and figure them out onto that. The other thing that brings politics in the boards is succession. Because at boards now, where you now have to appoint a chief executive officer or any executive, that's where you see politics at play in boards. Because at the end of the day, remember, you're employing someone who is going to be running an agenda, right? So that agenda from a board, you want to make sure that it's aligned to you. But when you're in the board, there are various power plays that are happening. So it normally raises ugly head at succession. That's where you see it on that. And what I say is, for most companies, we should just make sure that we've got a transparent succession plan. And succession debates and agendas must be discussed at every board meeting. You must be aware of. There's another one, and this is for management. I mean, how management play politics is that, I mean, you see a glossy board pack with all the nice numbers, graphs, and nowadays with the AI, geez, so impressive. All right? At times, management do play politics because they're trying to hide the operational weaknesses, the emerging risks, the bad news, failed initiatives, and dissenting management views. At times, it's hiding those kind of things. One of the things that I learned as well is the use of language. You know, if I say I'm concerned, and if I say I'm disappointed, they've got different impact on you. So Bothwel is an underperformer, and I'm the MD. I want to protect him. I would say I'm concerned with the quality of his work. I want to get him fired. He's incompetent. Right? So you must understand these nuances. Even when you're reading a board pack, you must be able to ask direct questions to say, what do you mean? Because if you don't, you are being played on that. I think in Zimbabwe, we've got quite a number of cases. I mean, I just took information from the public domain. And if there's anyone in Mikkels or a director, please forgive me if some of the things are not as they are, but this is from the public domain. Again, politics. When you look at the Mikkels story, which happened in 2024, there was boardroom disharmony and it became a governance issue. And we all read about it. Okay? That was politics at play. And then there's a net one. You know, when I did this presentation, I was not even aware that yesterday it came out again in the papers, the net one story. So this is on the past. All right? Again, it's who is in authority here? Is it the shareholder? Is it the CEO? Is it the board? But all I'm giving you is the picture of how politics impacts on boards. When you look at the two companies, the Mikkels and the net one, the context is almost the same. One is a listed company, the other one is a state-owned enterprise. The central dynamic, it was a board, a shareholder conflict in Mikkels, contested CEO board, and net one. But the most important thing that I would like you to dissect from the two, the governance question, when you look at those two cases, the Mikkels is who controls the board. On the government, on the net one, who is the authority over who? That's politics. Because the CEO would say, you are the board, this is what you want to do. But do you have the authority? All I'm doing here, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not profiling an opinion, I'm just creating awareness. So, politics is a reality. So how do we manage them? So that they are positive. Because remember I said, if you play it well, it can catapult you. If you add your performance, and then you add onto it networks, you add onto it relationships, you go far. So how do you manage the politics? First, I think at company level is open communication. Even at an individual level, it's open communication. Always look for fairness. And the most important one at an individual level is collaboration. Performance must be recognized, and at times you have to beat your own drum. Where you are dissenting, it needs to be in a respectful manner. And there must also be transparent criteria when decisions are being made. So good governance alone will not make it. But there are various pillars, there's 6 of them, that will starve politics from being toxic in your organizations. You must protect dissent. When someone speaks differently or is disagreeing, he or she must be protected. And normally it's the job of the chairman at board level and of the CEO at a company level. As boards must be transparent on CEO succession. There must be board independence. You must have fair number of independent non-executive directors. You must have an independent chair, and the information itself, it must be authentic, and there must be clarity of authority. So, ladies and gentlemen, workplace politics is inevitable because relationships, interests, ambition, power, and influence are inevitable. That's what makes us wake up in the morning, go to work, and that's what drives us. The challenge for us as employees is how do we navigate the politics ethically with political intelligence rather than political games. For leaders, prevent politics from destroying motivation, decision quality, and productivity. And for boards, ensure formal governance always remains stronger than informal influence. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyajeka. I'm not sure if you would have any questions on the floor. We can have a roving mic for Mr. Nyajeka.
Okay. Thank you for the very enlightening presentation, and I think. Oh, sorry, I'm on this side here, the right side. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
So thank you for the presentation. I think it's a very topical and important area, especially within the accounting profession as well. I just had a question in terms of how boards can best equip themselves, because I think, like you mentioned as well, about how there's the management side where sometimes management has glossy presentations, like you said, but sometimes some of the information may not be reflective of what's happening operationally. So there's always seems to be that big information asymmetry between management and boards. about what's going on within the business. How best do you think boards can equip themselves to be more aware of issues that are happening in the company? Also in cases where maybe the view that's coming from inside is different from what the reality actually is.
Okay. I think on boards, board is responsible for oversight and is actually ultimately responsible for the company, right? But they're not involved in the day-to-day management of the company. They depend on the CEO who is representing management. So the board ultimately becomes responsible for what the CEO is doing. So the first and foremost thing that the board must do is, number one, understand that they are responsible and they cannot hide away from their responsibility by pointing a finger at the CEO. So once they recognize that aspect and they take responsibility, boards must have the courage to ask the right questions to the CEO. And they must have the courage that if they're not getting answers that satisfy them, they must have the courage to continue asking, and also even at times bring in a third party to verify. Because why our profession grew, and if you look at the history of our profession, first of all, owners of businesses wanted to know what was happening. Therefore, they brought in what started as bookkeeping, then accountants, ultimately. And then the accountants were providing those numbers to the shareholders. But then they discovered that after so many scandals, said, come on, these numbers, we can't trust them. How can we trust them? Then they said, now let's have someone to audit them. All right? Again, realizing the fact that if Bothwel has done the numbers, he has done something to influence our decisions. With that realization, what do? We need someone to check. You get my point? So the boards must also have that kind of mentality, because when you ask for accountability or when you are checking, fact-checking, it's not that you don't trust the author or the person who has delivered that information. No, it's your duty, because ultimately you are going to be accountable for it. It's almost like, for example, my son is at school. I want to know how he's doing. The report card is addressed to me, right? Because I've got oversight over my son. It's my job to read that report card, right? And have a one-on-one discussion with my son and say, what's happening in maths? What's happening in science? But if the report card is sent to me and I don't read it, and I don't have that discussion with my son, if he fails, I can't go back to the school and say, why did my son fail? They will ask me, Mr. Nyajeka, we've been sending you consistently these reports. Did you read them? So that's how I would summarize that. How do you equip boards? Boards must read, and they must have the courage to ask questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nyajeka. The next question.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Nyajeka. And I think I really appreciate your presentation. And I've sort of seen you in action, being kind in business, and that's great. You have told us to master EQ, emotional intelligence, and appreciate the existence of politics, and I think we get that. But then, how do we factor in the unexplained? There are moments that you actually can't explain. Sometimes you get into rooms where you are instantly liked or disliked. doors that open for no reason, or rooms where you are instantly discounted. How do we factor in, is there another force? How do we factor in God or divine? Is it luck? Are we being lucky? Is all that you have told us, which I think is a big portion of it, all of it? I feel there's something else. How do we prepare for that?
Yeah, I didn't get your first part. When you started off.
No, I was just saying in life, there are certain things you can't explain.
Okay.
Sometimes most of the contracts, you get it from people you have never met. Some of your successes are from people who instantly just like you for no reason, and they have never heard of you. And some people claim to be your friends, but they become your biggest enemies without you knowing. So I feel there is another force that we probably you need to teach us as our coach. That is sometimes maybe not all that we do that ends up with where we are. I look at Donald Trump. Before he was elected, there was no reason to think he would win. And then there was no reason to ever think he would get a second term. But he continues day in, day out. And I look at all the things and I don't quite understand it. So maybe help us.
Okay. So it's quite an interesting one. So yesterday, I was on LinkedIn and there was someone who put a quote there, and I was trying to think about it. The quote was saying, if you chase butterflies, they'll fly away. But if you tender a good garden, they will come. Right? So from what you're saying, Ken, is I do understand there are things that happen in life and you can't understand it. But at the end of the day, you need to dig deep in yourself and say, I'm Bothwel. What is my purpose? And how am I going to achieve my purpose? What are my values? So you are basically tendering your own garden. Okay? And then when you have tended your own garden, it's going to attract whatever you are growing in that garden. Because you can't control or influence something that you don't know. But what's in your control is looking at self. And all I'm saying here with awareness is to say yourself is just not enough. You now need to say, what networks do I have? Right? What influence can I be doing? Right? So in doing all that, I think the butterflies will come or they won't come. And then I think that's where you now say that's the divine aspect. But there's not much, you have to do something. I mean, yeah. I don't know if I've answered you, Ken. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. The last two questions, please. The one with the mic. At the front.
All right, I have the mic here, so. Thank you, Bothwel, for your presentation. They say success has many fathers, while failure is an orphan. When you look at the board dynamics, most of it comes from shareholder influence. And while you can have the feeling that the decision might not be appropriate, you might not have the appropriate influence to say no. And half the time you're forced to carry on because it's a directive from above. How do you navigate then when it goes the other way? And now blame is now shifting on you instead of the ultimate authority because you are the implementer.
Yeah, that's a good one. I always get this. But you know, the example that I give people is I own a bus, right? I own a bus. And I give it to George to be the driver, right? And then I say to George, George, I want you to drive from Vic Falls to Harare, and I want you by 6 p.m. today.
Muted.
Sorry? Sorry? It's okay. Okay. I want you by 6 p.m. George has got a choice to say, boss, I can meet at 6. Or he can say, boss, what you're telling me, it's impossible. The road is impossible. So the moment George agrees to meet me at 6, I'm the owner of the bus. He's now responsible to make sure I get there at 6. You can't blame me. All right? So, if you're a board and there's an influential shareholder, that's fine. But how you are going to react to that, you can't run away from your responsibilities. So what I always say is, boards, you've got so much power, because when you're sitting on a board, you're sitting there as an individual, and with the new Companies Act, there's also risk of being sued as an individual. Therefore, when you get that directive, you must reflect, right? Because if you implement it and something goes wrong, you can't go back to the shareholder. It's on you. So it's an issue of reflection as directors. There are times in my experience that where directors have actually resigned from boards because they did not like what they were made to do. So it's a choice. Some say, Bothwel, I can't leave, I've got kids in school and those kind of. At the end of the day, when you take it, it's a choice. So you must know the risks that you have taken on that. That's what I would answer there. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. The last question at the fine.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. Bothwel, I just wanted to ask, how can one avoid the quote-unquote good intention trap? As a professional, we've basically been trained, to adhere to standards and everything. But sometimes your intentions might actually, be contrary, to probably what your other board members are aiming to achieve. And then at the end of the day, or let's say at the end of the project, you actually realize that in as much as you had good intentions or trying to adhere to certain standards, maybe your decision was wrong. So I'll give you an example. You've got companies like your Kodak or your Nokias. They failed to adhere to, the changing trend in technology because their finance team wanted to be efficient, right? They were trying to remain within certain margins, and they failed to accept probably what the engineers were saying. And at the end of the day, the companies failed, but the intention was good. So how can you sort of like prepare yourself to, or what measures can you put in place to avoid falling into that good trap? Because you end up in a position where people say accountants really should not be in strategy meetings because your role is just to be, scorekeepers and bookkeepers, if I may put it that way, because you're only adhering to standards instead of thinking outside, the box or seeing the bigger picture. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So if I get you right, is you, an accountant, you are doing your job well, you're applying the standards well, you've got clean audit reports, the audit partner loves you. You're the clean guy. And you're not involved in the strategy bit. That's the other thing now that I'm saying. You must be aware. You must be aware that having a nice board pack, a clean annual report, unqualified audit report, no management letter points, you're looking well. All I'm saying, you must realize there must be a handbrake somewhere. You need to reflect yourself. What are my networks? How am I influencing? You need now to look at yourself. And at the end of the day, it's not something you're going to say what values and what's going to be driving you are your values. So all I'm saying is be aware of that. That having a good pack, no management letter points, everybody saying good report in the board is not enough. You need to figure out, how do I disengage the handbrake? But there's nothing wrong as well not disengaging. It depends on what you want, guys. I mean, there are other guys who say, you know what, Bothwel, I just want to be an accountant or an FD. I don't want to be distracted by other things. That's fine. This is just awareness, ladies and gentlemen. It's a choice. You don't have to do it if that's not what you want. And all I'm saying, be aware. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyajeka. If I can ask Mr. Simbamambanda to come through with a token of appreciation for Mr. Nyajeka. A round of applause, please, for Mr. Nyajeka. Thank you very much. Just a reminder, if we can all ensure that we've registered for today. So the QR code has been sent through on our WhatsApp platform. So please make use of the WhatsApp platform to register for today. And also please, there it is, those that want to do it right now, please do so. And also there's a form to also feedback. It has also been, the QR code is also on WhatsApp. Please also use that to give feedback on the sessions so far. So if we can please register to ensure that we have registered. As we register, I would like to ask our other platinum sponsor, Old Mutual, to come up to give us a presentation. A round of applause for Old Mutual as they come up.
Please, can you put up the slides? Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all slept well, you were well fed this morning, and looking forward to today's sessions. On behalf of Old Mutual Zimbabwe Limited, welcome to Money Decisions Under Pressure. I think yesterday afternoon, from about 1:45, there was a Mentimeter link that was shared for your completion, and I think a reminder was shared later in the day. I hope you all had the opportunity to participate in that survey. If you have not participated, please kindly access the link now and take the opportunity to add your responses so that as I talk, you will have context of the questions that we shared. So we shared a poll, and for your benefit, the responses are entirely anonymous. And the idea is to get an understanding of how this room of finance professionals views money decisions. I will take you through a few slides, which will show the responses that we have received as of this morning. Okay, so first question. We asked this room of finance professionals, what would you do first with an unexpected amount of $10,000 US performance bonus? The delegates that responded, apologies, I can't see that over here, so I have to rely on this. But the majority indicated that they would invest for long-term growth. And that was 45 respondents, followed by 20 who indicated that they would pay off high interest debt, and 10 indicated that they would build or top up an emergency fund. And not a single person chose the response to treat themselves, which is positive, right? Because it's saying that it's positive. It's saying that this room has disciplined individuals, right? So the first one that had the majority, which was investing in the first instance, is exactly what you would hope to see from a room of chartered accountants, right? You understand that you put money, it compounds, it grows, you benefit. But the point I want to highlight is the majority was investing, second followed by high interest debt, but only 10 chose to invest in an emergency fund. So basically what this is saying to me is either we are choosing to invest before we build an emergency fund, or we have an emergency fund already. If you don't have an emergency fund, if trouble comes your way, you're going to start liquidating your investments. So it's always good to have some liquidity, right, for a rainy day. I was looking at some stats in a World Bank report which said 56% of adults in emerging markets don't actually have an emergency fund. That means at any given time, people are exposed. So I'm going to ask this room, how many of you actually have this emergency fund, which I'll define as 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside today? You lose your job today, you have 3 to 6 months. Because what you've told me, what you've said in the survey, what you've said in the survey is that if you get $10,000 today, you are investing. You are saying, you know what, I'm able to put my money aside for a lock-in of 18 months, 3 months, 6 months. If I have an emergency, I have somewhere to find funding. So a show of hands, how many have 3 to 6 months worth of savings set aside today? Hands up. Okay, one, this side. One. Okay, I have less than 10 hands up. We will move to the next question. I'll be done just now. We only have 5 questions. The second question is, when should serious retirement planning begin? Right? We gave some options. 32, which is the highest, said it needs to begin between the age of 30 and 40. 28 said before 30. 13 said from the age of 40 to 50. And very positive, no one said 5 to 10 years before retirement, because we all know why. You'll be under pressure, right? So roughly 80% of this room believe that planning should begin before the age of 40. This shows that we understand the theory of retirement very well. But understanding the theory of understanding retirement as well as the compounding nature of money is very different from actual behavior. Do we agree on that? So if we link this question back to the first one, we are basically confirming that groups that invest early and hold the course throughout their working lives will definitely get benefits by the time they get to retirement, whether it's in the 60s or the 70s. And the questions are building up. The third question, you were asked, which financial risk concerns you the most? In our responses, the most dominant from these investors, 35 individuals said loss of income. So you sitting in the room, the majority of us are worried about losing our income today. Inflation follows at 15 people, then things like medical expenses, and lastly, outliving savings. has the least number of votes. That's obviously very revealing. It shows that our greatest fear as we're sitting here is losing our earnings, meaning our current earning salaries are the most dominant things in our day-to-day. It wasn't about a slow erosion of value, which you would expect from individuals who are asset heavy and have lots of investments. The incline here is our current income. If we are to lose it today, it would be a significant shock. Very few are worried about outliving their savings. We only had 8. And this is despite the significant number who said retirement savings should begin before 40. So there's a tension there around what we believe and possibly what we could be doing. And I think in the world that we live in today, longevity risk is real, and it is one of the risks that is highly underweighted. I think if you look at it even from a sustainability perspective, if you look at global companies, I've seen the likes of Unilever and others, within their sustainability issues that they're dealing with, one of them is ensuring that their employees post-retirement actually have adequate wages or savings, if you put it, to be able to survive. This has even brought them to come up with some initiatives around increasing the number of working years, increasing the retirement age upwards, because there's that recognition that people don't actually have enough to be able to survive in that period. So the practical takeaway from this one is that as a group, income protection is our biggest concern. Things like medical cover, emergency buffer, which are the foundations, really should be the things that we start thinking about as we build to investments, because investments sit on top. Yes, you have investments, but are you able to take care of the day-to-day? So I think considerations of those emergency buffers, medical covers is critical. It is not an alternative to saving, but it is a foundation. Then I'll move to the last 2 questions. When you were asked which financial habit you'd improve first, we had a tie at the top. This group said we're going to choose to invest regularly. The other 26 said we want to reduce unnecessary spending. And then saving consistently had 13 votes, and 5 who said they would review their plans annually. So the split at the top is essentially the same from the other 2. We want to grow more by investing, and we want to leak less by reducing our spending. And both are important. We must do that. The one I'd highlight is the one that has 5 respondents, which is around reviewing the plan annually. I think this is a very affordable habit. You don't need to spend any money to review your plan, but it's probably one that will give you the most mileage. Because a plan that is set in a different economic environment will not fit a different economic. So it's not just going to be you can plug and play. And I think even in our businesses, this is why we do business planning. This is why we do scenario analysis. This is why we do different asset allocations. So our recommendation here is put an annual date in your calendars, review your plans, look at your contributions regularly, and even look at the different assets that you're focusing on, that you want to invest in, depending on the needs that you want to meet. Then the last question that we posed was, in one word, what does financial freedom mean to you? Delegates responded, and the range of words that came through. So this is not the best picture, but the most dominant word was peace, followed by independence and options. Then there was a long tail of other words: stability, choice, debt-free, passive income, time, security. And none of these words were talking about accumulation of wealth. The responses were really about how money made us feel and what it allows us to decide. And this is quite an important message for us as finance professionals. We measure wealth in numbers, but people don't experience wealth in numbers. It is about how it makes them feel. It gives people the ability to have peace of mind, and it gives people control over their choices. When you don't have money, it can be challenging. So this also sets the basis for advice. When we as Old Mutual are looking at a plan, it's not just about growing the balance, but it is about giving you that feeling, that experience that makes you happy. So if the numbers are growing, but you don't have peace, then obviously the job is not done. And that is the same even if you're coming up with a retirement plan. You could have a number, but is that the right number to give you peace, or it is just an accumulation? So pulling all the 5 answers together, I think our overall observation is this room invests with discipline. We understand compounding. And above all, in this room, our greatest fear is loss of income. And you see, different economies are going to have different concerns. Maybe in a country like Switzerland or Norway, it's going to be about, my investment returns, are they good enough? Loss of income might not be. It's context based, I guess. So the gaps that we have identified here are consistent, they are fixable. Things like emergency buffers. We said how many people have 3 to 6 months worth of savings. I had less than 10 hands up. These are things that we can begin to think about and start to put plans in place to have them. We have this longevity risk that we're not thinking about. People are living a lot longer than they did previously, meaning we need to save more to be able to ensure that we are comfortable when we're no longer able to generate the income that we are. And then lastly, I think very few people have an annual plan. And in terms of what do we all want? We all just actually want peace, independence, and options. Let us come with plans that actually deliver that. As Old Mutual, our commitment is to support you as the accounting profession to build solutions exactly around this experience that you desire. Protection first, followed by disciplined growth, and coming up with a plan that you review annually and ensure that it is fit for purpose. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Old Mutual. Another round of applause for our platinum sponsor, Old Mutual. Okay, as we move with our program, so there's been a slight change to our program. We are now starting with the Friday drinks session. So if the panelists for the Friday drinks session can get ready. Can all the council members please go to the Kazuma meeting room at the moment? There's something that you need to be debriefed on. All council members, if you can go to the Kazuma meeting room at the moment as we proceed with our Friday drinks session. Thank you. As they are making their way, we are now moving on to the Friday drinks session. And the panelists here will be talking about the economic cost of weak governance, fixing Zimbabwe's corporate culture. So allow me to beam the profiles of our speakers who are now up here front. Our first panelist and moderator is George Nyajeka. A round of applause for George Nyajeka as the profile comes up.
Nyajeka is a chartered accountant who traded the audit file for the front line of business. As business development executive at Inbucks, one of Zimbabwe's fastest growing fintech platforms, he turns financial rigor into market momentum, building the partnerships and products that put digital payments in millions of hands. An MBA holder and CAZ, George has held C-suite positions across Africa, bridging the discipline of the balance sheet, strategy, governance, and control with the boldness of the deal. helping scale businesses across multiple demanding markets on the continent. He makes the case that governance and growth are not mutually exclusive, but two sides of the same strategic coin.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Rufaro Zengeni.
Rufaro is an accountant by training who served his articles with Ernst & Young, EY, from 1999 to 2002. With over 15 years of senior managerial experience, he has worked as a stockbroker, investments analyst, and financial advisor, and is a licensed securities dealer and member of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. An avid writer, Rufaro contributes to the Quoted Companies Survey and Banks and Banking Survey magazines and is a panelist for financial discussions. He is also a partner and director at ZFN, Zimbabwe's leading financial newsletter, and the co-founder of FinCent Capital, while serving as a director in multiple companies, including a bureau de change and a financial advisory firm.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Rufaro Zengeni. Our next panelist is Tinashe Murapata.
Tinashe is the CEO and founder of Leon Africa, an investment holding company, and previously worked in London for Barclays Bank. He has extensive experience as an economist and banker across developing African markets, continuing this research through XDS Zimbabwe and as country economist for the Economist Intelligence Unit. Leon Africa actively invests in UPro Contact, a 500-seat Harare-based BPO serving UK clients, as well as in property and XDS Zimbabwe, the country's largest credit data management firm. He also shares market commentary on social media as Baba_Nyanyetsi and hosts the weekly YouTube show Friday Drinks. He studied at UZ, Wits Business School, and HCC Paris, and is completing a global EMBA with Trium, NYU, LSE, HCC.
Thank you. A round of applause for Tinashe Murapata. Our fourth panelist is Takuzo Mhlanga. Takuzo Mhlanga is the CEO of Wealth Access Investment Managers, an asset manager focused on infrastructure and trade finance. A round of applause, please, for Mr. Takuzo Mhlanga. So over to you, George.
Thank you, Tracy. Takuzo's profile is longer than they read out, but we roped him in at the last minute, so thank you very much for agreeing to join us at the last minute, Takuzo. Some of you watch the show Friday Drinks, which is on YouTube Friday afternoons, usually starting at 3 p.m. We've been asked to do this at 10 in the morning and sober, so good luck to us. I'm not sure what's in Rufaro's mug there. Are you sure? So, gentlemen, we've been asked to debate corporate governance in Zimbabwe. But before we delve into the meat of the matter, quick shotgun round. One sentence answers, no explanation, just cut to the chase. Starting with you, Rufaro. Corporate culture in Zimbabwe, score out of 10. 5. Taku?
4.
Tinashe, gun to your head.
4.5.
Okay, keep the mic, Tinashe. Gun to your head. Most overrated word in Zimbabwean corporate language.
Resilience.
Taku. Gun to your head, my guy. You're gonna get shot.
Oh, compliance.
Compliance. Thanks. Rufaro?
Sustainable.
Starting with you, Rufaro, what percentage of annual reports that you read do you actually believe?
About 5%.
Taku?
Maybe
60, 70%.
Tinashe?
The page number.
Tinashe, gun to your head. List one SOE, state-owned enterprise, and shut down one.
Could I start with the latter?
Okay.
All of them.
Taku, list one, shut down one.
I would list CESA tomorrow. I don't think I'll shut any down.
Irfan?
I would shut down most of them.
Name one. Gun to your head.
That I'll shut down.
Yes, tomorrow.
Zimbabwe.
And which one would you list tomorrow?
Kuvimba.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Okay, now let's maybe give you a chance to delve into that a bit more. Starting with you, Rufaro. Because obviously you're an analyst, you're issuing analysis on a lot of listed companies, you're also assisting with various corporate actions. When you look at them, in terms of the way they're managed and the way they're governed, how bad is it?
Corporatism in general, or the listed space?
In general.
Yeah, in general, I think the corporate culture is very conservative. So it's a lot of the businesses are not actually owner managed, and there tends to be a disconnect between the principal and the agents actually managing the businesses. And the sense I have is that they don't really optimize for growth, but they optimize for the longevity of their businesses. Especially given the traumatic economic history of our country, where that has destroyed a lot of value and caused a lot of businesses to go under. We tend to be quite conservative. The priority is to keep the ship sailing, not necessarily, so we're not very, so I find that it's conservative. We focus a lot on governance, on compliance and surviving, and we don't really have a growth mindset.
Okay, so you reading between the lines, I think you need a shot, eh? Because you're really hedging your bets here. You're not coming out clearly. But if I'm to interpret what you're saying, you're saying everybody's watching their backs. They're playing politics. If we go with Bothwel's presentation,
I wouldn't call it playing politics. I think it's just conservative. We don't have a very aggressive growth, go-getting mindset in the corporate world. I think, especially when you compare it to the kind of attitude that you see in the informal sector, where you can actually you can see the animal spirits, you can see the aggression, you can see the ambition, and you can see the tinkering and entrepreneurial flair. Which you don't. I mean, there's bits of it in corporates in the formal sector, but it's it's not across the board. It's not pervasive. It's probably 5 to 10% of corporates exhibit that kind of entrepreneurial flair and aggression that you see mostly in the informal sector.
Okay, Tinashe. So, okay, Rufaro is not. He's kind of mincing his words here, but if I take the liberty of paraphrasing, I think he's saying the problem with corporate Zimbabwe is there's a disconnect between management and ownership, and we hide behind all these corporate governance things. So nobody's actually doing anything. It's a tick box exercise. And in the informal sector, on the other hand, Rufaro is saying where the guy with whom the buck stops is running the business, things are happening there.
Thank you very much, George. I tend to be very sympathetic to Zimbabwean companies because there's a word that we don't want to talk about, which is very important, actually understanding Zimbabwean corporate entities, is we've been under so much trauma. People forget this. Hyperinflation is a traumatic event. Now, to go through your entire working period and you've gone through 3 bouts or 3 periods of hyperinflation, that in itself changes your psyche in a way that a lot of people don't understand. And that's why I use the word resilient, because that's the way we face the hyperinflation. That's why we don't save. All these things, all these issues. So before you get into the corporate, you must understand the individuals that are walking into these corporates, that are walking into the boardrooms. It's people who've gone through an external event, which is called hyperinflation. And if you look at the Weimar Republic in Germany, over 100 years ago, that's when it happened. And that trauma still lives with them. If you go into a bar in Germany, they still use cash.
What were you doing in a bar?
Friday drinks. If you go in a bar in France, they use a checkbook. Even now, those are 2 different reactions to an external event that happened. Now, the great thing that happened in Germany is they actually went through a process, a national process. I hate using this word, and maybe we should national healing. But there's a corporate cleansing that needs to happen in Zimbabwe before we can actually take on the growth mentality. Because without that, the mentality that we have is we're still stuck in a certain place and it's just oscillating around it. I will preach again because you've given me the platform.
Hey, you only have 2 minutes, my guy.
There's this word in the Bible where it says, the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. That explains Zimbabwe. The opportunities are there. They're real. But we cannot see them because we're still stuck, and purely because of what happened to us. And with that trauma, it'll be very difficult for us to get out of. If we solve that, maybe it's the new generation. I don't know. I don't have an answer to it. But if we solve that, then I believe that we'll be able to grow.
So, Taku, Rufaro and Tinashe are saying we are hiding behind corporate governance and corporate structures as an excuse, basically to do nothing. There's a lot more we could be achieving out there as business in this country and driving this economy forward. But we're holding back, and Tinashe is saying it's because we've been traumatized. A burnt child dreads fire. Do you agree with that? And how do we snap out of it? Hyperinflation, okay, it keeps coming back, but the worst of it was 20 years ago.
So I agree with the periods. I agree with the trauma that Tinashe has mentioned. I agree with the conservativeness that George has mentioned. I don't know if they are the ones that will necessarily entirely tell the corporate governance issue. I would actually go as far as to say that the last 20 years wasn't just about hyperinflation. We faced significant challenges that started to manifest partly as hyperinflation, right? That's my take with my short period being in Zim over the last 5 or so years. I do agree that they would have an impact to some extent, Tinashe. I think, I remember talking to a cousin around the 2008 period where he was saying that during those days, the culture was, if you hold Zimbabwean dollars, you hold them for as short a period as possible, then you let them go to someone else. Inherently, he was actually saying that what it meant was, you know that I'm holding a bomb, I'm giving it to you, it's your problem. And somehow you're supposed to have a solution for it. And once you've given me my money, I've won. But in his head, the way he was explaining it, I've won over you, who I've given the Zimbabwean dollars, and so on and so forth. I feel like the takeaway from the last 20 or so years, which is not unique to Zimbabwe, as you said, is that the trauma is in the fact that we're a fragmented and fractured society. And I think that's sort of the very beginning of what our issues are. Like, why should I care about corporate governance, and why should I be a proper steward of something that, A, I don't know what's going to happen in the long run, I'm not in control of of what's going to happen. B, I have to worry about my survival and my sustenance today, which goes against the responsibility of someone who stands in on behalf of stakeholders and not on individual interest. That's the curse of the period we've gone through. To further what Tinashe was saying, it's a fact that after the Second World War, growth was not, the entrepreneurial mindset that you're talking about was not as big as it was with the generation that came after the Second World War, because they didn't have the trauma and the memory of what they went through before, right? But the question is, we use this word corporate governance, but like I keep coming back to like our fundamentals as people, right? Like, which is to say that when you're an honorable person, you're working in the best of the abilities of what you're supposed to be doing. That has been kind of broken, corporate or not, right? How do we fix that? And where do we start to heal in that perspective, I think?
Did you just ask me back the question I asked you?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, Rufaro, you want to try and answer it? You've got 300 business leaders sitting in the room, and you guys are telling them, you guys are doing nothing. You're hiding behind those spreadsheets that show who attended how many meetings in the annual report. But they want to know, okay, so what should we be doing, and how do we snap out of it?
So I think the solution is a change in mindset. I think, and you can actually see it when you analyze the performance of corporates today, in the listed space. The businesses that have grown significantly, that are thriving, have this mindset that is transcendent the trauma. They're thinking about opportunities, they're thinking about growth. And I think as long as we're in this conservative mindset, you're not going to see the opportunities, because you're wired to think about the threats to your business, to what could go wrong, and that's all you'll see. You'll just, when you scan the environment, you're just seeing threats and things that could go wrong instead of opportunities. So I think it's a mindset change that needs to happen, I don't know what could be helpful in terms of catalyzing such a shift in mindset, but certainly if we're going to move forward in terms of the growth of these businesses and the growth of the economy, corporate Zimbabwe has to have a growth mindset instead of a conservative mindset.
Okay, these guys don't seem to know the answer. Malvin, could we maybe put up a QR there, and if once the QR is up, if you could just go into that questionnaire and say what you think the solution is, because obviously these guys just know how to say it's wrong. They don't know what the correct answer is. What do you think we should do as business managers in Zimbabwe to get ourselves out of this rut where we're just trying to cover our backs, where we're being political, and actually start to step out there and drive growth? The context, obviously, is, if anyone has had a chance to look at Mtuli's numbers from yesterday, all the macros are in the right direction. The economy is pumping, in inverted commas, but very few of our businesses are seeing that share of that pumping. What do we need to do? And we'll come back to that towards the end of the session. I want to come back a little bit, Tinashe, to, I think you said it, or Taku said it, the source of the trauma, which is the hyperinflation. But what the hyperinflation did was to create a perception about money. So and you can challenge my assertion, we believe that our money is bad as Zimbabweans. And bad money, or soft money, incentivizes a certain kind of decision making. We saw that on Kuda's presentation a few minutes ago, that all of us, if we got money, we use polite language to say high risk opportunity. What did we say? High return opportunity. But what it just means is just a drop banner. If you get some money, you're looking for an opportunity, you go spinner. Nobody's thinking that this money is hard and it's firm. I can invest it and hold on to it for a rainy day. So my question is that assertion true?
Partly true, and I just want to step back a bit so that we sort of understand. Throughout time immemorial, there's a way in which you're supposed to make money. There's a way in which a business is supposed to make money, production, productivity, innovation, all those nice things. The trauma that we're talking about, why hyperinflation is such a traumatic event, is it appends all that understanding of production. So why management eventually doesn't do anything? It's because they realize that, well, you're not going to be paid for doing things. You're going to be paid for burning, for example, or you're going to be paid for borrowing. And there's obviously levels of leverage, where you're helping your business. But in Zimbabwe, it's you are highly leveraged because you know that the currency will be worthless. And that's how you make money. Now, what that does is there's a wealth transfer from highly productive people to highly speculative people. Is that a good thing? Well, I think our psyche tells us it's not. So again, you say, in inverted commas, there's a boom. Is that real? In 2023, there was a change of currency. Someone lost money. You can't tell that person who's still in business to say, oh, you should grow. Yes, you're traumatized. That doesn't matter. Just grow. And they still have 2023 where they lost money, real money. But how do we get above that? And how do we progress as a people? Because, you're looking for solutions. I think one easy solution that we're doing is very easy. It's you come out here and it's scorching, it's hot, but there's a swimming pool and you don't want to swim, right? And it's there and you can feel the heat, but somewhat you don't want to because of the trauma or whatever, or you've never swum in your life, but it's there. We're not saying swim, we're just saying get into the water. It might actually be very helpful for you. And my solution to Zimbabwe, again, as far as growth is concerned, is to say get out of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has its unique problems and unique issues, but I would say that Zimbabweans are very innovative. You've understood a certain way of doing business in Zimbabwe. If you go out of Zimbabwe, you're going to find the markets much easier for you. Yes, it'll be tough, but you're already used to that. I don't know why you're worried. Zim is already tough as it is. But when you get out of Zimbabwe, you will find environments that are more conducive for growth. I was just talking to Rufaro just before, and I was like, if you look at the last 10 years, and you look at the companies that are listed, how many have actually delivered real growth? And this is using USD inflation in the US. So you need to have grown. When you look at your 2014 numbers, the inflation between then and now, it's around 36%. So put a premium of around 40%. You need to beat 40%. How many businesses in Zimbabwe have done so? We identified two. One of which, I'm not gonna, you can find this, use any of the AIs and it will tell you which company.
It's public information, you can name them.
Oh, yeah, Simbisa. It's one of the companies that have actually done phenomenally well. But the story there, it's not in Zimbabwe, right? It's because they ventured outside of Zimbabwe. And because they ventured outside of Zimbabwe, that consolidation has actually helped them a lot. So they still enjoy Zimbabwe, but because they've gone out there, and I don't know why Zimbabwean companies are still stuck in Zimbabwe. You can still grow in Zimbabwe. I'm not saying don't grow in Zimbabwe, But I'm just saying that there's a swimming pool outside of Zimbabwe, and it will cool your nervousness and the issues that you have. And it's actually a healing process of your trauma to be in an environment where you're not talking of hyperinflation, where you lose currencies. Literally, there's an obliteration of currency almost every 5 years.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off so we keep going. Taku, do you want to respond to that? So, to what extent is that thinking the problem? That all the good people have left, and it's just us left. You know, the guys who weren't the sharpest pencils in the box.
So that is the exact risk that I run by saying exactly what's on my mind, and it's unfair because Tinashe has been around since 2009, 2010, and just suffered through some of the worst atrocities as everybody else has in this room. I think it's now time for Zimbabwean companies to come home. I think it's time for Zimbabweans to come home. I'm saying this as someone who was also outside the country for a long time. I don't think that anyone is going to solve these problems anywhere besides us. I remember a conversation that, George, we had a couple of years ago. I think Tinashe, you were there, and I think it was in Nairobi at the time, where George was saying that if you step away a little bit from Zim as a Zimbabwean company, or as a Zimbabwean individual, and you consider yourself an export going anywhere else, which is what he's talking about, I think there's one positive thing to be said. We've got a very strong skill set. We know how to handle inflation. So anybody in this room can just have a quick calculation and say that if this exchange rate in Kenya moves this way or that way, this is how it affects me. And you can, it's actually kind of crazy, right? Like when Americans are now talking about inflation, it's something that everybody in this room knows and understands very clearly. So you know and understand what it means and how to work and operate in that environment. So if the whole world is going through an inflationary period, the Zimbabwean is in a very strong place. I think those skills need to come back to Zim. I think the biggest challenge that actually exists is actually to the point that I made initially, which is that, like, you know, the Germans who went through the Germans are still using hard currency. I've also experienced this, right? I saw it with my own eyes. But over time, the newer guys, the younger guys who come in, like I say this example in the Second World War, have a way of, they don't have the memory from the past. So they will go in and they will take over, and then they will be more bullish than the guys who went to war, because they don't think about, oh my gosh, if the Great War comes back, I'm going to lose everything, which is the Zimbabwean mentality. I would argue that the Zimbabweans will have an ability to forget about what happened in the past and actually start to move ahead and forge ahead and actually realize that, yeah, we can talk about hyperinflation. It's still a very recent memory, once, twice, 3 times. But if you don't have blind optimism, you're going to keep repeating the same mistakes and living in the same world. Maybe as a refresher, like local companies should start thinking about hiring more people of our own from the diaspora, right? Who haven't gone through the same thing, who might have some naivety about this trauma. They can help us to think differently, right? Together with that, with new corporate governance lifelines coming in. Because I can tell you that the guys who are going to make the most amount of money over the next 10 years in this country are the people who have decided to forget about the past and move ahead. I think we can all see the influx of people who are coming back into the country, right?
Okay, sorry, where's Masimba? Masimba gave us a very proper brief of what to discuss. Sorry, we've gone off script. This it's now a group therapy session. But I think it's interesting stuff. Rufaro, if we follow what Taku is saying, Taku is basically explaining the rise of the Mbingas, right? And I think it's a pertinent feature in this room, right? Because all these guys here have studied for years. The really clever ones studied for 5 years to become CAs. The rest of us did it in 7 years plus. And we don't have 3 months savings. And there are people driving multiple Rolls Royces around Harare. And if I extrapolate what Taku is saying, he's saying the reason you don't have 3 months savings and somebody else who did not write very difficult exams for 7 years has got multiple Rolls Royces is because they are not held back by the trauma of what's happened in the past. What do you say to that? Both factually, kind of, mechanically, do you think that mechanically works, and ethically?
Well, I'm not going to go into the ethics of the guys in Rolls Royces. I think people can form their own opinions on that. But I think it's a mindset thing. At the end of the day, how well you do going forward based on whether you're looking for opportunities or whether you're just aiming to stay afloat and survive. And I think we are at inflection point, and I see it in my work in the capital markets where I often speak to foreigners who are looking at opportunities in Zimbabwe who are much more bullish and excited and optimistic than people living and working here. They see the opportunities, they see, whether it's in gold, whether it's in energy, whether it's in the consumer sector, they see the demand, and they're excited about setting up shop here and attacking the opportunities. And I think that, we need to understand that the outlook is different, where, and if you actually look at the numbers, whether it's consumer demand, Delta had a trading update earlier this week. Their numbers are off the charts. The minister's budget yesterday, those numbers look bullish. They look optimistic. So I think we just need to embrace the where we are to say, yes, we've had these awful experiences historically over the last 20, 25 years, but we're in a different place. And the outlook is bullish, and we need to transition into that growth mindset. And I think that's really, from a leadership perspective, the guys in this room are sitting in boardrooms. I think that's the message that we should be pushing, to say, look, there are all these challenges, yes, but there's opportunity out there. Let's get after it.
Taku. So there's somebody sitting out there. I'm trying to think of a name of someone. Oh, so there's someone sitting out there. He's a finance manager or a financial controller. Farai. Where's Farai? Machodo. He's somewhere there. There he is. He's like a financial controller somewhere in a big company. He's heard all this. He's sold. Growth mindset. But he doesn't own the business. He's not the CEO. And if he shows up at the office on Monday, bouncing off the walls with a growth mindset, he might be looking for a job. What's your advice to Farai?
So I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday. And they were mentioning that they've got someone who's, actually, I think the words that they used was, if I'm level 30, the person is a level 3 in the organization. But this level 3 person, it's someone I think who's maybe 1 or 2 years out of university. Whenever they want something done, they don't hesitate to call upstairs to say, something is causing anxiety for me. I gave it to my boss, but I just wanted to make sure that you know how important it is. And it will annoy everybody in the chain, but to that person, this executive was telling me the story, they actually really appreciated it, because it shows that there's someone out there who's willing to make things happen, and they're saying there's something that's in the way. I don't know what it is. I would like us to, I need to make sure that my work is done. There's loss to skin on that one. I'm not saying that I should recommend it for everybody to do that. But I think as individuals, even as we're hiring people and as we go into a company and we're choosing organizations that we go into, attitude and mindset that Rufaro is talking about it's a lot, right? It's the start of everything. The question is, I think, more along the lines of what do we do with the leaders in these organizations to start to realize that maybe we do have some trauma in the back of our minds that's affecting how we think about growth, which we have managed to shoehorn into a conversation about corporate governance. But if I'm thinking about it in terms of corporate governance, if we've got these blind spots because of everything that we've gone through, how do we empower the younger guys in our organizations to have a louder voice and be able to speak freely and help us to go forward? Because that energy is kind of needed in an organization. So I think, conversations directly with your own leadership might actually help. These softer issues are not as easy to ask and answer as we would like, but I think what I would hope to see is more of a challenge in terms of our leaders in our organizations to say, we need to really snap out of the old way of doing things if we're going to survive in the new world. Because globalization is here, right? AI is here. If we don't accept certain growth mindsets, this conversation is no longer a Zimbabwe conversation alone. That day has sailed, right? Cost of production is going to go down significantly. Cost of transportation is going to go down significantly. Competition is going to come from outside. We have to snap out of it. And the way to do it is to support those younger guys to actually be able to have a voice.
So I've got a question here from the audience, and keep them coming. I'm going through them. How effective is corporate governance frameworks in Zimbabwe, considering that companies continue to crumble and liquidate? So this person, unfortunately, they didn't sign their name, is challenging our assertion that corporate Zimbabwe is hiding behind governance and is not doing anything. They're saying actually there is actually very little governance because we're still having catastrophic business failures. Your take on that, Tinashe?
Yeah, I tend to agree with them. And
are you disagreeing with yourself?
Yeah. What I'm saying is I agree with them because the way companies are failing has nothing to do with corporate governance or how businesses are managed. It's because of the external environment. The impact of the external environment is such that it's very difficult to survive. It's very difficult to make it. And unfortunately, when you've been in Zimbabwe for so long, you try and do the impossible, which is fine. You guys are showing us that you can get past the trauma. Great for you guys. But in a population of people, it turns out that you're in the minority. Most people cannot. They will hold on to that, trauma for a very long time. That's why in Germany, it's been over 100 years. And what I am actually advocating for is to say that the first thing is we need to realize the limitations of Zimbabwe. Even if Zimbabwe was doing well, very, very well, it's 17 million people. It's a small country. There's no country that is ever developed by looking inwards. We need to look outwards. We need to go out there. If you look at Southeast Asia, if you look at the Germans, if you look at the Europeans, everyone, any country that is developed has done so by going outside. And I'm actually saying that do not believe that you're a corporate failure in Zimbabwe. It's primarily because the environment has not been conducive for you. And I'm saying if you were to look just outside of Zimbabwe, you will find that the same company could operate very well across. And when you still have the capital, if you're in Zimbabwe, if you still have the capital, the whole idea is why don't you spread your wings and look elsewhere?
But if we all go abroad, then are we just going to lock up the country?
There's no one who said you must close shop in Zimbabwe and go. I'm saying that the growth opportunity, if you look at what happened in South Africa in the 80s, even in the 90s, a lot of the companies, you had two kinds of companies. Those that looked inwards and said, there's growth in South Africa, let's remain in South Africa. And then you have a company like MTN that said, you know what, we've got a bit of capital. We can still grow in South Africa, but we believe in the rest of Africa and what is actually happening in the rest of Africa. Southeast Asia is the same story as well. It's when you don't look inwards and you look outward, you're more likely to develop. And I'm saying that maybe that's sometimes a change in environment is what you need to get past the trauma, rather than having, industrial psychologist for 20 years trying to, go back to, okay, how do we get that trauma? I'm just saying sometimes just the change of environment, taking your business to Mozambique. I'm not saying stop doing business in Zimbabwe, but I'm just saying if you just go across the border and you operate in a different environment, you're going to find that it's going to be more conducive for you. Even in the best of times.
I'm going to push back.
Rufaro, if you respond briefly, Taku is bursting to respond to that.
Yeah, so I've got a different perspective. So if you think about, one of our most successful entrepreneurs, the founder of Simbisa and what used to be the INSCO group of companies, and if you look at the corporate history of those businesses, they were forged through the crucible of Zimbabwean chaos over the last 25, 30 years. They were entrepreneurial, they had all these challenges, they needed, they ended up in the crocodile business because they needed currency, which was a scarce commodity at some point. They were very dynamic, they were very aggressive, they were very entrepreneurial. And today, that group of companies is one of the biggest, most successful group of companies in the country. And it's an entrepreneurial, ambitious growth mindset that made that possible. And I think a lot of the corporates that fail and that have failed through yes, it's difficult. The waters are choppy and chaotic. But if you manage that business through a very tight corporate straitjacket, where you say, we're in this space and we're not going to pivot and we're not going to do things differently and we're not going to be creative, we're not going to be entrepreneurial, we're not going to take risks, then you'll be carried out. You're not going to survive. So I think, and it's not to say that the skills that we have and the businesses in building the businesses that we that are here aren't transferable to markets outside Zim, that we should always be inward looking. So I'm not necessarily saying that Tinashe is wrong to say we should exploit opportunities outside. But what I'm saying is, within Zimbabwe, yes, there are lots of challenges. The way to address them and survive and thrive is to have that entrepreneurial growth mindset.
Okay. Taku, very briefly, because I think people are tired of hearing about growth mindset now. They've got, looking at their comments, they want to hear about other things.
So it's two things. I think for the most part, like the Zimbabwean corporate and the Zimbabwean individual has been looking outward for the last 28, 26 years. I think most executives in here either have siblings or children or whatever who are outside the country already. I think our companies have already been trying to do businesses outside the country. I'm arguing that my premise is this. Zimbabwe is about to go, what I believe. I want to believe that Zimbabwe, I have a bullish mindset or outlook on Zimbabwe right now. I want to believe that Sangorno Pawanet, Tinashe, you're tired, my brother. Zimbabwe, I think, is now ready for us. What I'm saying is, if you're going to focus on going outside, everybody else is going to be looking at Zimbabwe going forward, and you're going to lose your own competitive advantage locally.
Okay, let's change gears. Corporate governance, can we define it? This is a question from the audience. I still haven't heard a speaker actually address the work culture, including leading effectively and ethically. Most Zimbabwean corporates are failing because it's power-driven and ego-driven. People still want to be called sir, ma'am. People want employees to make them tea, regardless of their level. Leaders are not willing to listen to the young ones. The toxic work environment is choking growth. Ideas are never generated in such environments. Who would like to take that?
Yeah. So a very good place to start is where governance is actually coming from, and it comes from ethics. And where does ethics come from? It's coming from moral, so a moral code. And where do morals come from? And there are two ideas around moral codes, where they come from, is well understood practices. So we can agree as a society that, okay, over time we've been doing these things for a very long time, and these are the standard practices and expectations that we have. So you could have, any group can do that. As Friday Drinks, we have our governance structure, that these are the moral codes that we will run things with, overtly and covertly.
Constantly breaches.
And we do chastise them once in a while. So there's that, or it could come from external. So it's very possible for it to come from external. And I think King's governance, a lot of strategists will do that. They will say, okay, you're an organization, but we'll go around the world and we will create these codes for you. And as a society, as the Chartered Accountants Society, as the institute, these are the codes that we will give you. So whether you agree with them or not, you will abide with them. And I think that that's where our conversation, because there's a disconnect, is that the corporate governance culture has been sort of imposed on us. And yet our reality that we live with in Zimbabwe is such that we can't exactly abide by that code. Let me give a very good example, is holding cash. All the accountants here have been told that you must bank your money. But we all know we're not banking the money. Right? So the code says something, and a proper governance system is saying something, and yet we're doing something else because the reality of the market determines and dictates how we behave. So it doesn't, yes, it might seem like we're skirting around the issue, but we're saying the reality on the ground, why we're behaving in a particular way that is in discordance with corporate governance, it's because our reality knows that if we don't do what is practical, you'll be wiped off. You will liquidate.
I'll push back on behalf of the asker of the question, right? They are saying it's who we are as Zimbabweans. It's not the environment. And if I may maybe add to the question and use a practical example that I think we've all encountered, it might not have registered. Have you ever noticed when you go into Pick and Pay, they all have name tags with their first names? When you have a problem and the cashier calls the manager, what does she call him? She calls him Mr. But his name tag says Brian. But when she's got a problem, she presses a button and then she says, Mr. Mashumba. And what this person is saying is that's who we are. We write it down. They went for training. They got name badges to remind them that they can call each other by their first names. But Mr. Mashumba is not having any of that. Nobody's going to be calling me Brian in this supermarket. You're going to call me Mr. Mashumba. Now imagine, I actually then did go to one particular Pick and Pay, and the way the tills was arranged didn't make sense. Like, customers were queuing from behind the cashiers. So I asked the cashier, but surely this is inconvenient. And she said, yeah. I said, so why haven't you guys fixed it? She's like, when is also it? So she's sitting there spending a whole day having to serve customers like this. And she hasn't told Mr. Mashumba because Mr. Mashumba is not interested. And I think that's the point of the contribution. And I see Taku nodding. You agree?
Yes.
Oh, that was very concise. Thank you. And then there's a whole lot of questions here. I'm not going to read all of them. But a lot of people, Rufaro, are saying it's the government's fault. The policymakers, the environment they've created, the unpredictability, etc. They're basically saying until the government gets their act right, you can't solve all these governance issues.
Well, I think firstly, it's not in our control what the government policy of the day is, whether it's convenient, whether it makes sense, whether it makes our lives easier or much more difficult. But I'll say two things about that briefly. Number one, it's incumbent on us to the extent that there's policies that aren't working for us, to actually lobby and engage the government for reversals, for changes, for adjustments. And number two, we've got to navigate those choppy waters. That's just part of our jobs as business leaders and managers, to deal with these difficult policy frameworks.
Thank you. We'll just go through some of the short questions. Taku, how do we make money ethically?
I just always assumed you wake up, you go to work, and you get a salary, and it's ethical.
Nobody's buying a Rolls Royce with a salary, my guy.
Like, okay, how would the question be different if it was, how do you make money?
Because there's the word ethically.
No, even in my own head, right? Like I think the challenge I have is I don't know how to make money. Do you get my point? So whether the framework is ethical or not, like that's the question, right? Like it's a fundamental question. And then underneath that, then you can just then say that this is the ethical framework of it. I can't answer the question. How do you make money?
I think Tinashe wants to rescue you.
The question, I would throw back the question to them and say, whose ethics? Right? So once you start putting words like ethics, then we have to define which ethics are we actually talking about. So if we can define that, then yes, how do we make money according to those particular standards? But I think that, yeah, that's, so I would say, please be emphatic on what you actually mean by ethics and which ethics are we talking about.
So partially in response to that, there's another separate question. It just says, have you considered taxes? But I will maybe put some flesh to that and say, is it unethical to not pay all your IMTT?
I keep saying this. Okay, which ethics are you actually looking at? And there's an ethic that is coming from kings, and this is from the UK, or it's coming from the chartered accountancy. And then there's our lived reality, where we do have an ethic amongst ourselves. That's why we trade in cash, right? We're avoiding to pay IMTT. But avoiding to pay IMTT has nothing to do with ethics. It's just being reasonable. Why would you pay more when you shouldn't pay more? Like, it's just being reasonable. Now, the ethics that you would want there, I'm a Christian, so I would always say that the first thing is, if you want, let's take it apart. Making money, and I like what Taku is saying, that's a different question altogether, and we need to, take it apart on its own. And then there's the ethics. And if you're a Christian, the best way of defining your ethics is just go to church and sit with your priest and ask, and with your Bible, and then understand how money was made within the biblical context. And then if you're somewhere in between, it's to first, even as an institution, as an institute, you guys need to also come up with what is ethics within the Zimbabwean context. I think that you contributed quite a bit as far as hyperinflation in accounting is concerned around the world, because there was a disconnect between what the world was saying is the standard and what you were, the lived reality in Zimbabwe, and you contributed to that. So there could be a whole lot more that we could talk about, and that's how the Institute can change ethics. How to make money, the principles are pretty straightforward, but what I want to say is about ethics is that they evolve, and they do change. And you can contribute to that change.
Thank you. I see Yvonne is standing, so I will ask the last question.
Before you do, I just want to add one more thing as well. We've got a lot of problems in this country. I actually was trying to run my head thinking about how do you make money, ethical or not, right? And I think what it comes down to is service, right? To say, like, we've got so many problems. If you see a pothole somewhere, it's not unethical to say that, like, how do I write a proposal to council to fix this and make some money from it? And in the process, you're serving a community, right? Literally, I think that's the most ethical way to do it.
Thank you. Now, one last round for everyone. What fixes this culture, ethics, governance issue more effectively? Is it the market or is it regulation? Shotgun.
The market, I think there's a marketplace of ideas, and I think if we have honest conversations, we're likely to make better decisions and get better outcomes.
How does the market come? How is that the market?
So there's a marketplace of ideas where we're having these conversations, where we're discussing the challenges that we have, whether it's ethics, corporate governance, how do you make money? And if we have more of these conversations, that's saying sunlight is the best disinfectant. We're much more likely to figure out solutions and move forward.
Taku?
I say it's both. I don't know why we're disconnected from our own governments, but I would say it's both. The government comes up with policies which we help to put in there because the government represents us. We are the market every day. Everybody has a role to play as well, right? As well.
Tinashe?
Yeah, I agree. It's just the market. The market is very important, and then, yeah, hallelujah. So it's the market, and then the second thing is to then codify the market practices so that they form and embed the ethical practice. The big problem is when there's a disconnect between the ethics and the market. So always codify practices that is closely aligned to the market as possible.
Thank you, gentlemen. And in closing, I'm going to read something that one of the audience members has put on the platform here. We need to start thinking about what we want to hand over to future generations, not being selfish. Hyperinflation has just left us selfish, just thinking about ourselves, which is not a good thing. I think that's an apt summary of the discussion this morning. Thank you very much for being part of this debate. Thank you very much to those who have contributed. After lunch, we will be at the bar here in Elephant Hills. We're going to record a few episodes of Friday Drinks there. We'll be very happy to host and interview any members who would like to subject themselves to our, shall we call it, raucous behavior after Rufaro has had one or two. And anyone who just wants to come and quietly watch, you're more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. A round of applause again for our panelists. If I can ask Olette to come forward and give our panelists some tokens of appreciation. A round of applause for Olette as she comes through. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you. A round of applause again as they make height of ways. So at this moment in time, allow me to ask FBC, who are one of our gold sponsors, to come through for their presentation. A round of applause for our FBC presenter.
How are we feeling? Great presentations this morning, right? No, it's a pleasure for FBC to be a gold sponsor at this year's ICAZ Winter School. I think Edna and team can attest to the fact that we really value this organization, and we value the input that all of you in this room bring to this conference and obviously to our economy at large. My name is Priscilla Sadomba. I am Head of Investor Relations and Communications for FBC Holdings or FBC Group. And we just want to, share with you a little bit about us, who we are. Most of you do know who FBC is. But for those of you who might not be in the know, we are a financially diversified company that is listed, a publicly listed entity on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. And our subsidiaries cover consumer and investment banking, insurance services, digital and innovation services. So under our consumer and investment banking, we've got obviously FBC Bank. We've got two commercial banks actually under our wing. Crown Bank, as you know, the last 2 years, we have been we acquired the former Standard Chartered Bank Zimbabwe, and it is now FBC Crown Bank. FBC Building Society, I think most of you also know, is no longer in existence. Instead, we have FBC Properties, which is now running our property development arm. Microplan, our microfinance arm. FBC Venture Capital, which deals with venture capital investments. We also have FBC Securities, dealing with equities trading and our stock exchange. On the insurance side, we have FBC Insurance, which is covering all our non-life, medical insurance, life assurance, etc. I'm not sure that my presentation is showing. It doesn't seem to be moving with my clicker. Malvin, if you can please show the presentation. Going backwards. Yeah, there we are. Thank you very much. We then have digital and innovation services, and that is something, this is our financial services, financial technology company. Harani is our our digital solutions, in-house digital solutions. So we are obviously developing solutions for our group, but also having the ability to on-sell outside. For example, we were the first financial services organization to introduce digital onboarding during the COVID era, where you can actually open an account from the comfort of your desk or from your home. So it's those kind of solutions that we are saying we want to obviously be agile and we want to be moving with the times. Right. So I also have an opportunity to market to this very esteemed group of delegates our newly introduced FBC Premium MasterCard. Many of you probably already have the regular prepaid MasterCard, which you've used. I think later on in our presentation, you'll see that many of you have actually used our ICAZ MasterCard in the past. But this particular suite of MasterCard cards is really suited for you guys. Let me tell you why. Okay. It has a host of services and benefits that you can really, really enjoy. We have complimentary lounge access in over 1,200 locations around the world. I know that you guys are jet setters, whether you're going on business or whether you're going on holiday. 30% of hotel bookings from some of the best hotel chains around the world. This is a good card. 15% discount from the IHG Hotel and Resorts across Europe, Maldives, India, Middle East, and Africa. Avis car rental, 35% discount on car rental and Avis President's Club membership. We also have 10% discount from Farfetch when spending $200 above, free premium memberships, account with over 100,000 my US dollar retailers, 30% discount shipping to anywhere, 10% discount on all Showmax monthly subscriptions. I know that you all do use Showmax. We also have generous discounts on gifts, retail, and dining in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Mauritius. For those of you who were delayed with the Air Zimbabwe flight, the wonderful, incredible Air Zimbabwe flight from yesterday, the best flight I've ever been on, right? Those who were on it? I see some laughs. There were a lot of screaming on that flight. Lots of captain. But for those of you who were experienced, you're laughing. It was one of the hairiest flights I've ever been on in my entire life. But we were delayed. And when I was delayed, I was able to access the lounges that are in the airport. So it gives you access to airport lounges, select airport lounges across the globe. Once you've booked your ticket, all you do is you download the World Pass, the MasterCard World Pass, you register your card, and guess what? You are able to enjoy lounge access all over the world. So this is a really good card, guys. Right, we also have a MasterCard Gold Rand prepaid card, guys. So for those of you who are doing business in South Africa, you don't want to carry a lot of rands on you, you are actually able to have a Rand card that you can actually just use when you are across the border. So it's ideal for traders, it's ideal for those that are traveling back and forth, right? And then for your normal prepaid MasterCard, those of you who've got kids abroad, studying abroad, relatives abroad, you can actually just deposit money straight from here, and within 5 minutes, the person has that money. So instead of going through the laborious effort of doing TTs, Mom, and Sis Namari, I need $50 to get me through this week, you can actually just go to our deposit-taking ATMs. Yes, we can deposit cash now, and in minutes, your daughter or your son is able to have that money. So MasterCard, sweet group of cards that we have, really great. And of course, our famous MasterCard ACA. Many of you have actually used this card, and I'm sure you can attest to its efficiency. The other thing that I just want to promote very quickly is that we've got our Your FBC app, which is an incredible all-in-one app, which is linking all our banking, our microfinance, our insurance, and our payments all on one app. You can make payments, you can send money, you can buy airtime, you can pay DSTV, you can do so many things with this one app. So I encourage you to download it from the Play Store. All right. Right, that's our Your FBC app. Then this one is something that I know that many of you might be interested in, following from our previous presenters. What are we doing with our money? What are the likely things that we are wanting to invest in? This is one of the ways that you can actually use your extra income. We have quite a number of properties that are available on sale right now. Marondera Ruare, we've got some flats that are there. Zvishavane 4 miles, we've got stands that are available also there, and Wange in Mpumalanga, which is a very fast growing area. Also a good way to channel your extras, but your extra cash. Please stop by and speak to our customer representative outside for more information on that one. Right, and then I want to talk about FBC insurance. Many of you obviously have different health plans, but I kid you not, our FBC insurance offering for your employees is actually one of the best and highly accepted medical aid programs in Zimbabwe at the moment. We are accepted by so many practitioners right now. And what is it that makes us different? We've actually managed to negotiate tariffs with service providers, pre-funding options for those procedures that need pre-funding. And we've got generous, very, very, very generous annual limits. I kid you not, guys. So for your shortfalls and co-payments, you will find that we are a very, very suitable alternative. We also know that one of the weaknesses of many schemes is that your chronic medication benefit actually expires quite quickly. So we are able to sort of counter that, and we're able to draw from a global limit that we've set for ourselves. So over and above your individual limit for that year, or for your family's limit, we're actually able to exhaust that limit and go beyond and actually access from our global fund. So that's a really good point to note. And like I said before, it is very, very widely accepted. One of the main reasons is that most medical aid societies will pay the service providers maybe once a month, right? And in an environment like ours, which is very volatile, and you always want to make sure that you're making effective use of your cash, we are able to actually do 2 payment runs within a month. So that's very, very attractive to service providers. So it's one of the other areas that make the FBC insurance value proposition quite high. Right. So I think in a nutshell, I really hope that you've taken some learnings away in terms of our product offering at FBC. I expect to see some of you visiting our desk for more information. And we are really proud to have been sponsors this year at the ICAZ Winter School. And we will certainly be back next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, FBC, one of our gold sponsors. Another round of applause for our FBC team. Okay, we are running behind schedule a little bit because we had a slow start. Apologies for that. But at this moment, if we can take a short break. There are some teas outside and cookies outside. So maybe just 10 minutes to get something, refresh yourselves, and we come back in here. You can even come back with your cup of coffee so that we can continue with the program and trying to get back into time. So if we can take a short break, please. And then just notice, as we are on our short break, I would like to ask those that are going on the boat cruise to please go with their IDs to the secretariat room. The IDs are needed for registration of those that are going for the boat cruise. So during the short break, please, if you're going on the boat cruise, take your ID to the secretariat room. Thank you. Can we be back in 10 minutes? Thanks.